Before you go any further, look below and click the subscribe button. Hello, everyone. This is Melissa Ambers with Savvy the Business Podcast. Thank you for joining. And as always, we love to bring information to you, value to you, and just let you know some of the things that can help you in your journey, in your career, your business, and just sometimes even just your everyday life. So today we have Kelly Parker on with us, and she is amazing at storytelling. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Because online you always hear about people saying share your story, tell a story, and some of us just don't know what story to share. We don't know how to even get started. So I'm bringing you this information today, so hopefully it will help you and you can start doing all of your storytelling and get the notice that you want. So to start out with, we're going to read a little bit of Kelly's bio to give you a little bit about who she is. Kelly Parker empowers brands to turn followers into devoted fans with the power of storytelling. Her consulting firm teaches marketing teams and corporate professionals how to create memorable messages that effectively communicate the unique value of their products and company. A marketing professional trained at global enterprises such as Sherwin-Williams, American Greetings, Kelly believes that a simple, well-told story can raise profits, reshape culture, and revive a brand's reputation. A sought-after keynote speaker for more than 15 years, Kelly's trainings mix motivation with instruction and offer streamlined systems and frameworks that equip attendees to quickly apply the techniques they learn. Kelly hosts the Business Storytelling Made Simple podcast, where she teaches the easy way to create and convey unforgettable stories. A wife, a mom of three, Kelly enjoys Netflix binges and some good old peace and quiet in her free time, along with a good book. So, Kelly, thank you for coming on and sharing yourself and your stories with us today.
Thank you for having me, Melissa. It's such a treat to get to chat with you.
Absolutely. So tell us, one, how did you get into storytelling, and what happened through your journeys for you to really realize, like, oh wait, this is something great, I need to stand on this?
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to story, I've always just gravitated towards them to a point where I haven't paid it a lot of attention. And I think that can happen a lot of times with our gifts. They come so easy to us, and we think everybody sees the world through the lens that we see it. Because some of my friends tease me, with you, it's always a story. I don't care what happens, you're going to tell a story about it. And then, it took some good coaching for me to realize, what, there's a gift in that could be shared with other people that could move companies forward and individuals forward. For me, I see everything as a story. And so it's allowed me to develop systems to help people see their life and their situations, companies, and their marketing situations through story.
Okay, so what do you see? And I'm just going to stick with social media because that's where everybody's at now, in the digital streets on social media. So what do you see on social media when people are trying to tell a story or do something, to get a point across? What are the biggest mistakes that you see that people are doing?
Yeah, to me, the biggest mistake, and I think the pressure of social media, is you think you're supposed to show up looking like everybody else. And you may even think you're supposed to tell your story like everybody else. And I see a lot of that, kind of trying to fit into a box. And I think the true magic of story is being able to step out and be your authentic self. And so I feel like that's one of the biggest kind of pitfalls we fall into, is not being true to our for real self. And only being willing to go but so deep. But what if you went that next layer that maybe you think nobody should hear about or know about? And it might not be everything. I'm not saying all your business, but a lot of times when we go that next layer that maybe we're a little iffy about, that's the layer that connects with other people. It's that vulnerability that connects one heart to another heart.
Do you give me an example?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, So on my LinkedIn, it's funny because I always joke with myself. When I go on LinkedIn, I feel like I'm in a boardroom and it just feels like everybody is assessing you and it feels very formal. And I was like, you know what? I don't like that. I don't like that. And I don't want to show up like that. And so I ended up recording this video and talking about how we morph into another person sometimes when we get into certain rooms. And when I get in my LinkedIn room, I turn into a woman from the UK. I'm so formal and I'm using commas and semicolons and stuff I don't use no other time, but when I get on here. Yeah. And I was just gonna say, you know what, I'm done with that. This is me. Take me or leave me. I gotta show up as me, Yeah. And so sometimes just those little glimmers of who you really are, those glimmers of your story, the glimmers of who you really are, can be a connection point and can be something that people will remember you for. That's the truth and the power of your real story.
Do you think people can get too vulnerable?
Yeah, but I think that more often than not, it's the other way. But for sure, I mean, there's that level of appropriateness. And to me, I think the other thing about story is you always have to know your point, because the point is not to be vulnerable or to do just to be vulnerable or to like do therapy on the internet. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what is the point? The point is to have a connection point with somebody else. So it's the matter of sharing just enough to derive that connection with another person. So I don't need to share everything, but it might be a few things that I cherry pick that I feel like would connect.
Okay.
So that sweet spot,
So how do you go about crafting your perfect story?
Yeah, so when you think about story, this is how I think about it. It's got to have 4 characteristics. So every good story has a character. I will stand on this all the days of my life, that if your story does not have a person in it, it's not a story. Right? So think about who is your main character of your story. It might be you, it's probably you. But think about having a person in your story. The second thing, every good story has a challenge, it has drama, it has tension, it has some sort of contrast. I think about when you go to the movies and there's the music in the background and then it shifts and it's like fast. Now, something's about to happen. Like it's time for the drama, right? Mm-hmm. And if you didn't have that, it would be boring. It wouldn't be worth seeing. It wouldn't be worth watching. And so that's what we have to remember when we tell stories. So it doesn't always have to be super dramatic, like a high-speed chase, like the police chase you through the city. It could be just the tension you had within yourself. Maybe you were at work and you were doubting yourself, right? They put you on to do this project and you're like, I don't really know if I can do it. Like that's tension, that's challenge. So it's a matter of playing that up and making sure that's front and center in the story. The other thing is imagery. So if I talk about, your plum shirt, right? Or if I had my hair pulled up in a bun on top of my head, things that you can literally see, concrete imagery that can transport people to the picture that you have in your head, put it in their head, is critical for a story. Other than that, it feels generic and they might not be able to follow along. So it's always powerful to include a few details in there. And the last thing, got to remember, stories are about feelings. They're about transferring feelings. So you always got to think about, how do I want people to feel as I'm telling it or after it, right? Or how did I feel? Maybe I'm recounting something that I experienced. How did I feel when I was experiencing that? You know what I mean? So what do I need to share to get you to feel the same thing I was feeling when that happened to me? And, between those 4 aspects, thinking about how to bring those together, you have a really good story.
Okay, now you mentioned the 4 things that they really need to include when they're crafting their message. As they're crafting this message, where would you say is a point where you should stop and kind of refocus if you think you're going too far into it, or you're doing too much? Let's just say that you're just doing too much. You think you're giving it, you're trying to connect, but you're doing too much. So where would that stopping point be? Or maybe even just say, let's back away right now and come back later.
Yeah. I like to think of the point as that anchor. So I think about a target, and every word that you're saying is like that bow and arrow, and everything you're saying is supposed to hit that point right in the middle of that bullseye. So you could even start by saying, so let's take this example. You've been at work and you've been put on this big project and you're doubting yourself. You could even start with some iteration of that point. I learned several years ago never to doubt myself. I was da 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 da, and I was put on this team and blah, 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 blah. And you give them enough to lead right back to what? The point. And when I finished that presentation and I just heard all those applause, it was just confirmation for what I knew all along. And I was scared to own that I am much more powerful than I realized. And I knew from then on never to doubt myself, or, I'm just making it up. But thinking about what is that bottom line thing that I want people to think, know, feel, or do. And you can start there and you can end there and know if what I'm saying is not clearly in alignment with what I want them to think, know, feel, or do, I need to come on back. I need to stop, Yeah. So letting that anchor you. The other thing that you can do is read the room, right? So if you can see when people are starting to glaze over, don't ignore that. That's a signal for you to bring it back, shorten it, truncate, you know what I mean? So look at the response that you're getting to let you know how to, maybe pivot in the moment.
I like that, you're saying pay attention to your room. We want to pay attention to the room where we're getting the applause or people are laughing or, if they're talking, not, ignoring you. But that other thing too is, they're glazing over. They're kind of like, okay, how much longer, they're going to be, so it's really paying attention to those, to knowing, okay, when you need to shift back. And when I think about storytelling and being on the stage, I kind of go to comedians as well, because they are somewhat telling a story. And if their audience is there with them laughing and, chiming in, they're, doing what they need to do, but they know when they get, people getting bored, or if they're not getting the punchline and it's only a handful of people laughing, or if it's a fake laugh, like, haha, okay, yeah, we got you. So it's kind of the same thing that I would relate to, of kind of when you're doing a story. Would you agree with that, or would you kind of say not really?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think about the idea of a comedian practicing their material or their stories. Maybe they'll go to a smaller club, and just see how it hits and see what happens. You can take that same mentality and say, okay, if I want to be really good at these stories, let me practice them in a very unintimidating environment. Maybe it's some friends or family members, or a very low risk meeting at work, or whatever it might be, and try it out and see what happens, and begin to observe those points when it seems like people were not following you, or they were, you know what I mean? The other thing that I think is very much like, being a comedian or being on stage is the timing. Because there's this idea of comedic timing, there's also this idea of the timing with telling the story, in terms of maybe pausing for effect, to really play up that tension or that drama, or pausing to let people, maybe think on something that was really profound that you said. So yeah, I see a ton of parallels between being a good storyteller and kind of that comedic space, for sure.
Okay. Can you share some examples on how a person can use storytelling for business?
Yes. Listen, more often than not, there's a place for story. So I'll say this from the outset. A lot of times when we think about quote unquote business, we put on our power suit and we are formal and we are ready.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you step into that formal space and you kind of disarm people with this story they weren't expecting, because they were expecting you to say 60% of our sales came from the west side of the country. And we need, you know what I mean? They're expecting your spiel. When you're able to marry that with a story, it always causes you to stand out in so many contexts. But specifically, I would say in the corporate space, an interview, and we all kind of know this, but think of this anew. Really utilizing your best stories and your best examples from your career on an interview. And the other part, making sure that you're tailoring those stories to what that employer is looking for, right? And really tailoring it toward maybe the language that they have used. You always want to tailor your story, not to you and where you are and all this stuff, but insert yourself in the context of the audience and the listener. Another really good place to use story is if you're ever interfacing with senior leadership, any kind of leadership within your organization, baby, you better always be ready with an example, a clear-cut story that illustrates the value that you bring to the organization. So, it's one thing to say, I worked on ABC project. It's another thing to be able to talk very specifically about what you did and the impact that you had, and really paint a picture in that moment to really illustrate your impact. For those of us that function in like the entrepreneur space, make sure that your story is coming to life on your website, on your LinkedIn, and when you're networking, right? Because I don't know about y'all, but I can struggle sometimes in the moment with the whole, what do you do? Or right? It could be very intimidating, and so a lot of times we can use story just to open up those lines of communication as we're meeting new people. If you're practiced and you can be concise, now that's the key. Now, I ain't by asking for your life story, right? But
right.
A little tidbit, it can be a very powerful way to introduce yourself, because again, who's doing that? Nobody's really doing that. So they're really good ways to help you stand out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that as networking, because we see him like, I know what I do. I can spill this out. I'm in the mirror. You spitting it out. It's not a problem. You're just going. You're not stuttering. You're not tripping over words. But the minute you get in front of somebody and it's like all of a sudden, some just go. You're like, and it happens, and it's like that practice of knowing that sometimes you might get tripped up. It's not that you don't know what you do, but it's that thing that just happens, but I think, over time for me, getting comfortable in those conversations, that even when I do get tripped up and I'm sitting here saying to myself, how did you forget what you do? And I'm sitting here thinking, like, what is it I do? But it's like I look around and find something, I talk about something, and then I come back, and then I just kind of somehow roll back into it. And it's like, how in the world can I forget what I do?
Right.
So I'm glad that you said that, with networking for, the people that are listening, that are entrepreneurs and doing these networking events, that it happens.
Yeah. It surely does. The other cool thing about story is, the research tells us that facts are 20 times more likely to be remembered if they're part of a story, and it helps us to remember. So even on our end, like helping myself remember, now what do I do?
Yeah.
It's a little easier to remember for ourselves if I kind of know, okay, well, this is the story that I kind of get into to share with people what I do.
Okay. All right, what would you like, because what you're saying, stories, and it's taking me to TikTok. And a lot of people are afraid of TikTok because it's, your pranks and dancing and all this other stuff that's going on. But there are a lot of business owners that use TikTok for their businesses. So utilizing a platform like that to tell stories, would you say that, someone want to take something that's viral on TikTok and somehow implement it into their story to kind of catch a person's attention? How would you suggest someone do that?
Yeah, I think the key to that, if you're a business owner trying to integrate those two worlds, is to really land on what is the key thing that you want folks to learn about you, or what is that key information that you want to put out there to establish yourself as a thought leader, and making sure that you're still keeping that front and center as you're using that trend, right? So maybe starting with that trend, but following up with something of true substance that really make sure that you're in line with not just the trend, but who is your true target consumer. Like, use the trend as a vehicle to get where you were already trying to go. Don't get so lost in the trend that, I don't know where I'm at or what I'm doing, but use it to serve your benefit.
Right. What would you suggest to someone, that's in this point, they're looking at this, they see you giving all of these valuable tips, and they're still struggling. For someone that, may be afraid of writing, might, just be unsure of, how to really, really dig deep into that story, what would be that nugget, that thing that they, that you would say would send them to kind of get started or try to start cracking open the door?
I think the first thing that I would think about is making a list, right?
Mhm.
Like have a repository of what your stories are. And they don't have to be deep. Like you don't have to start with your deep, dark stuff. You don't have to. It could just be things that have happened to you that everybody can relate to, right? Maybe it was your first time riding a bike. Maybe it was your first day of college. Maybe it was you fill in the blank, and you will begin to realize a lot of times we don't know the depth of knowledge and the depths of stories we have already at our disposal. And then take that list and begin to match it up with, okay, what could I teach somebody with this story? The first day I went to Kent State. The first day that I went to Kent State and I was feeling nervous about how I was going to manage what I'm doing at XYZ, what lesson could I teach somebody out of that? Right? So then go to the next one. Okay, again, the point is always the thing about stories. That what are the different points? What are the different teaching elements that I could utilize out of these stories? Now, once you have these two things, you can begin to build out a story. I have a point. I know what I want to teach you. I know what I want you to think or know. And I have some sort of imagery that I want to paint. And from there, you can begin to build it out. Now, you can tell the same story multiple ways. You could tell it, short form, or maybe you have more time. You could build it out more, right? So then from there, it depends on, okay, who am I talking to? What's the forum, right? And then you can use some of those other details to begin to build those stories out. So I would say start at your level of comfort, right? It could be something super simple. Start there. Again, start in some of these informal settings. Maybe you don't want to start storytelling with the CEO, okay? Maybe you want to start over here and see how it goes.
Right.
But as a start, we build the confidence through action. We don't build confidence through ruminating. We build it through getting in action. So I would say find like a low level, low risk way to bring one of these stories to life and see how it goes.
Wow. The example of, testing out, what I want to throw in too is like when you're testing it out, don't be afraid to test it out with somebody that don't know you. Because we have to remember that family, friends can be biased. And they're going to give it because they want to support you. They want to say, okay, hey, bravo, you're doing good. But, mix up your group, let it be some family and friends, but bring in some people, maybe bring some of their friends that don't know you. And so you can really get, a real impact of what you're doing and if it's really resonating with them or not. And just be open because it could be some harsh critique coming back, but I would look at it as a plus to get that harsh critique. So it's just really making sure that when you put your audience together, that you're not putting together a biased group because you're not going to get the full effect of what you're really doing. Or the outcome that you really want. So just be careful when you're doing that and, with your bias group. So Kelly, what else would you want to leave, with our audience on storytelling and just, getting their brand and their point out there to really connect with their audience?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple other things come to mind. First, we do want to give concrete details when we tell a story because they just help people follow along and really visualize. But you don't want to fall into the pitfall of including too many details, right? To where people get lost and then they start thinking about, okay, well, whatever was she talking about? What am I going to have for dinner? Because it's just too much. There's too much happening, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that we want to think about. But at the same time, remember to just keep it simple. I feel like that's just another tenet of storytelling. The more simple that you can keep it, it tends to be all the more powerful. So if there's certain things that you can leave out, a lot of times it's wise to leave them out. So what you leave in becomes that much more potent and powerful. And the last thing I share is that no matter what kind of story you're telling, make sure that you are focused first and foremost on the audience, right? So the 4-part framework that we teach really helps people to hone in on that first. So first we talk about the problem. What problem is your audience facing that you could share something that might be able to help them or move them forward? And then from there, look at pursuit. What is it that your audience wants? What is that one thing that you're uniquely positioned to speak to that they really desire and want for their future? And so once we have these two pieces and we know them, now we're ready to paint the picture. Not before, but after I understand your problem and pursuit, then I can paint a picture for you that is relevant to actually where you are. And I'm more likely to get your attention because now I'm speaking your language, right? So we paint that picture through the imagery, through a relatable character, right? Through an emotion that we're transferring, through that challenge, that tension. And then finally, now we've set the stage for what I call the proposal, right? So we're going in for the ask, right? So maybe I want to be able to position my product or service, as something that you should use, or I want to be able to let you know that I'm the prime candidate for this promotion that's coming up, or whatever that thing is, that question, that proposal that you want to make. Once we follow those 4 P's in order, we put ourselves in a position to be successful.
Thank you so much. Let everyone know how they can reach you, how they contact you, your website, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Kelly D. Parker, and you can also find me on my website, kellydparker.com.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kelly, for coming on and talking about storytelling and just letting people know how to, shake it off and just get started.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Melissa.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Follow us on our Instagram at SavvyMagBiz and on our YouTube channel, Savvy, the Business Podcast. Thank you for joining us on Savvy, the Business Podcast. If you want to be a guest, send an email to media@savvymag.biz. That's media@savvymag.biz. Don't miss out on the opportunity to be heard by millions.